Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Deborah. It's really good to be with everyone here this morning. Really good to be with you. I want to start this morning by paying tribute to Deborah and to the ISM. First of all, for the leadership that they've shown to music education musicians over the past 20 months as we've navigated our way through the pandemic. It's not been easy for anyone who earns a living through music, and I know that for many of you it's been frustrating, and for others it's been an extremely worrying time. And the response of many in the music world, in the music education world, has been so generous with online collaboration, online performance. And it's been so important to colleagues in all parts of our community to have the ISM, along with the MTA, Music Mark and others, supporting and encouraging. So on behalf of everyone, really, Deborah and the ISM, I want to say thank you. I also want to thank the ISM for the campaigning work that you do to advocate for music education. Deborah and I have had many conversations over the years about these issues, in particular the EBAC and music from the early years up to Key Stage 3. Now I'm going to talk about both in just a moment, but I want to say up front, there's absolutely no denying that the passion, the commendable intention and determination that is shown by the ISM and other organisations is undeniable, and I'd like to thank you for that most sincerely. I'm not going to tell you today that there hasn't been any unintended or even perhaps intended consequences in some schools as a result of music not being included in the EBAC. Now, I say in schools because nowhere have I seen the EBAC cited by governments, ministers, or even Ofsted as being a Key Stage 3 measure or requirement. EBAC is only about Key Stage 4. But you can't help wondering why some schools choose to give increased weekly curriculum time to, say, geography, history and languages in Key Stage 3, but put music, DT and art, 3 foundation subjects with equal status to the others in national curriculum on the carousel. You can't tell me that gives a message about equality of subjects. And you can't tell me that having music every third term or every third half term helps pupils to know more and remember more. And you can't tell me that's good preparation or promotion for music GCSE. And so we need to ask questions where that's happening, and we do. And I also think it's reasonable for subject leaders to ask their head teachers some direct questions if music has been carouselled. And do use that term, by the way. Ask the question, why has music been carouselled? However, I'm old enough and I've been through too many campaigns to know that the easiest wins are those that you have complete control over yourself. I'm also a great believer in looking at yourself in the mirror and recognize the changes that you can make personally rather than pressurizing others to make the change. So while getting music, art and DT onto the EBAC or equivalents may make a difference to the numbers taking GCSE music, we have to be completely honest with ourselves and recognize that the EBAC is not the only reason why music is unpopular at Key Stage 4, or indeed why some head teachers have reduced music at Key Stage 3. To be brutally honest, the quality of music education at Key Stage 3 in too many of our secondary schools is not good enough, whether it's taught for 1 hour every week or 1 term in 3. Let me give you a real example from a Year 9 music class seen earlier this year. This was in a school where music is given 1 hour every week for all of years 7 to 9. No carousel. The topic for the term was called Performing as a Rock Band, and the premise was that the pupils could choose a song. They'd be given a set of instruments, some written notes, including chord sequences, and a staved notated melody line and recording of the song. And their task was to learn the component parts and then put them together to make a performance. Now, in a class of around 30, there were 7 groups dispersed in practice rooms, the corridor, and in the main classroom. The group I'm going to talk about, a group of 4 pupils, had chosen a song that had recently been high in the charts. It was a catchy, popular number, and it was based entirely around a 4-chord sequence from the circle of fifths, repeated over and over again. Just 4 chords in the song, repeated over and over again. The group had been given the chord sequence A minor, D minor 7, G7, C, and were putting this together using a drum kit, a keyboard, a bass guitar, and a solo singer. Now, because the 7 groups in the class were doing different songs, the whole class activity that preceded the practical work was talking in vague terms about what makes a good performance. You've got to listen to each other. You've got to make sure the vocals can be heard. You've got to be confident, smile. It's all about the image and so on. The teacher had told me earlier in that day that the pupils should know the chords. They've done some simple drumming work in year 8, and they all enjoyed singing. So this project was all about bringing all this knowledge together in the performance. But it became very clear this knowledge was not secure, because the keyboard player struggled to play the chords. The vocalist struggled with the complex, agile vocal line, and they simply couldn't put it together. The girl with the bass guitar asked me, "Sir, how do you play the chord of A minor on the bass guitar?" Now, the teacher was working hard. He was working so hard to manage the rooms, to keep everything going, to be encouraging. But the fact of the matter was that he was not actually teaching music. He was just facilitating an activity. He was a supervisor, not a teacher. You'll not be surprised to know that the quality of performance was really poor. There was no way it was ever going to sound like the original song, which was performed, by the way, by a group of 7 singers with vocal lines that wove in and out of each other like an agile game of tag. And what's more, the original, which the pupils had the recording of, had been asked to listen to, was actually not in C major, it was in E major. And the chords in the recording was C sharp minor, F sharp minor 7, B7, and E. They knew it sounded different, but they couldn't say why. And the saddest thing of all was what one boy said to me at the end of the lesson. He said, "Sir, I really used to like this song, but when this is over, I never want to hear it again." And I recorded that in my evidence. Now, one of the aims of this project, of course, was to take music the pupils knew and use that as a conduit for engaging them in music education. And that's not a bad thing. In fact, if I were back in the classroom teaching myself, there's an odds-on chance I would use that same song in my teaching. It's a great piece of music. But it's not about the image, it's not about the style, it's not about the coolness of pretending to be in a pop group. That song had a really important musical core, the circle of fifths chord sequence. Now just imagine a year 9 project called Circles, for example, building on the work done in primary chords early in Key Stage 3 and incrementally introducing the pupils to the circle of fifths, the chain of sevenths, letting them make up, improvise and build their own compositions around their own 4-chord circle, showing them how Bach used the circle of fifths and Brandenburg too, and then showing them how the circle of fifths had been used in that particular song which they knew. Just imagine the teacher actually teaching imparting his expertise and leading the class through this new magical knowledge, helping the pupils understand music they were familiar with, introduce them to new music, helping them relate it to what they already know, enabling them to apply the knowledge of the chords, the circle of fifths, the chain of sevenths, and applying it to give their own creative responses and then making their own musical meaning. How exciting is that? But also imagine those pupils who have been in that poor experience. When it comes to choosing their GCSE options, imagine describing to their parents that experience they had in this Key Stage 3 music classroom. If you're a 14-year-old pupil or their parent, how seriously would you consider music as a GCSE option? Then we take you now to a primary school, a Year 5 classroom. The lesson is billed as being all about Latin music. The pupils are all playing glockenspiels and have learned a simple melody using notes B, A, and G. The backing track they're playing along with is certainly in a Latin American style. But the problem is that what they're playing is not. The melody they're playing, and it was notated in the same way that I'm showing you on the screen there, uses straight crotchets and the occasional semi-breve. There's no swaying, syncopated rhythm that's typical of the style. And what's more, once they play it through, they play it again, and they play it again, and they play it again. The teacher says, well done, let's play again. Well done, let's play again. And after a while, the teacher says, we're now going to do your improvisations using notes B, A, and G. And everyone in the class is going to have a go. So on goes the backing track, and the improvisation starts. The teacher points to each pupil in turn to improvise. Each pupil is allowed to improvise for between 1 and 4 bars. There's no rhyme or reason before it's somebody else's turn. And it would be accurate to say the responses were random. No sense of rhythm, no sense of melodic shape. And there was no guidance. The teacher said, just make something up, improvise, just make something up in the space. And the assessment given by the teacher was that if you can improvise using one of those 3 notes, B, A, or G, you get a bronze level. If you improvise on 2 notes, you get a silver. And if you can improvise on all 3 notes, that's gold. That's not how music works. That was not musical teaching or musical learning. And of course, the pupils were playing instruments. They were engaged insofar as they were occupied. They were on task insofar as they were doing what the teacher asked them, but their musical development was limited. The lesson was supposedly about Latin music, but they weren't really learning anything deep or meaningful about the Latin musical style. And the melody they were playing was simple in pitch and rhythm. Once they had learned it, and it was clear they'd learned it some lessons ago, they just repeated it again and again. In terms of standards, this is Year 5. We should be expecting so much more of 10-year-olds. Just think how sophisticated some 10-year-olds writing and reading can be. Think of some of the complicated maths problems we ask Year 5 to solve. Shouldn't we be ambitious in classroom music? Because in maths terms, this lesson was like saying, what's 2 plus 2? 4. Well done. What's 2 plus 2? 4. Well done. What's 2 plus 2? 4. Well done. 4 is 2 plus what? 2. Well done. Now, just give me any old number, improvise, shout out any old number at me. Well done. We wouldn't accept that in mathematics, so why do we accept it in music? Colleagues, we need to take back control of music education, not from government or from head teachers, but from ourselves. We need to be very clear that simply providing activities Simply having music on the timetable is not enough. Whatever time is given to music on the timetable, we need to make that time worthwhile. We need to recognise there is high level knowledge and skills needed to teach and learn music. Reducing the role of the music teacher to that of a mere facilitator is doing our profession a disservice. It devalues the skill and the importance of teaching music. We wouldn't accept a football coach simply setting up a game, giving the pupils a ball and telling them to get on with it themselves. Now, I understand that challenges that schools have, and primary teachers in particular, have to cover the whole curriculum. They cannot be experts in everything. I get that. I know that these teachers need the scaffold of a reliable scheme of work and resources to guide them. But in the primary school that I talked about, the teacher who was non-specialist was using a scheme of work that says in its preamble, anyone can teach these materials, but I disagree. If you're teaching music, you need to know and show what it means to model musically. It's not true that just anyone can teach music or anyone can teach a scheme of work. Because as with all schemes of work, even the model music curriculum, the resources are only ever as good as the teachers delivering them. Schemes of work can't be taught by just anyone, at least not successfully. Music teachers need good CPD, and that includes building up their confidence to lead musically and not just supervise activity. A good music curriculum and a good quality music education requires pupils to be taught properly and with deep musical knowledge. Remember, Ofsted doesn't judge teachers, we judge the quality of education. Yes, teaching is part of that, but we need to make sure that curriculum teachers are given a rigorous and deep training to deliver the curriculum musically. If we want music in the curriculum to stand alongside English, maths, geography, and history, then our curriculum must provide the same depth of knowledge. Putting on activities that are called music, but which don't develop that intrinsic musicality is not good enough. We've said in our recent Ofsted research review that it's essential that the music curriculum provides pupils with robust, incrementally increasing and demanding musical knowledge, technical knowledge of how to play and sing accurately and fluently, constructive knowledge that understands how the music we play, compose, and listen is built and functions, and expressive knowledge so that we can understand the meaning of music. And these are not alternatives. They're not three separate activities. They're not isolated. They're all essentials that work together to create what we all recognize as musical understanding. And that is why the heart is in the middle of that Venn diagram, because that is musical understanding, musical development that comes from all three. And there's some slides here that actually give some detail about what we mean by technical knowledge in music education. Technical, incrementally building the technique of singing and playing instruments. Incrementally building technical knowledge of music tech, understanding the music and the technology. Incrementally building knowledge of technical systems for notation, tablature, and programming. And that really has to be robust. Technical knowledge of playing and singing. The constructive knowledge is incrementally learning how music works, building up your understanding and knowledge of scales, chords, keys, systems, forms, structures. Regularly using that increasing knowledge to what I'm calling deconstruction in music. And if you teach English, you'll recognize the term deconstruction, analyzing, deconstructing music, finding out how the component parts fit together to make the sound you hear. Reconstructive, where you're performing the works of others. You're putting pieces back together again in performance. And constructing, where you're creating your own pieces. And those three constructs are really so important. And then we move to expressive, where you're building and increasing connected knowledge of music's provenance, the history, the culture, the social, geographical purpose and meaning of music. Understanding how those elements or the interrelated dimensions work together in interrelated ways of music expression, and then applying your technical and constructive knowledge with increasing sophistication to give personal musical meaning. Those three things together make musical understanding. And when you have all three, that's when you become a musician. Just to remind you there how important those three are working together. Now, I wouldn't want you to think it's all doom and gloom, because there are schools in this country where 30, 40, 50 pupils a year take GCSE music. We've just inspected a school in London where at Key Stage 3, pupils are taught music not in carousels, but actually anti-carousels, because they're given half-size classes of 15, 16 for music throughout Key Stage 3. And on the website, the school says all music lessons are practical, and there is a focus on development of performing composing skills alongside developing musical understanding and knowledge. And you can see there the technical, constructive, and the expressive in different words. An outstanding school in the north of England, where in Key Stage 3, the pupils have music for 1 hour a week, talks on its website about the curriculum being quite simply about teaching pupils how music works. That's a statement. Key Stage 3 is to help children understand how music works. And they say on the school website, in each unit, we take an existing piece of music, put it in context, look at other works that are similar to it in style, or share some of its musical features. We explore the work in various ways. It might be by analysing it, performing sections of it, improvising ideas based on fragments of it, composing new ideas to replace or set alongside it, or arranging the material we've made to create a finished whole. That same school goes on to say about GCSE music, this is an immensely creative and fulfilling course with a number of pathways to suit a wide range of musicians. Having completed our Key Stage 3 music course, all students will have the learning experiences and skills required to get started on GCSE. That school recognises it. You see the statement in the second paragraph on your screen that shows you how they prepare students to opt for GCSE music. Really important. Those two schools are not wrong, but putting activities like the ones I described earlier in front of our children in the music classroom does not advocate well for music education. The one thing we can do to advocate for music, to make music a desirable option at Key Stage 4, to ensure that Key Stage 1, Key Stage 2 and early years music gives pupils a thorough musical education, is to make our teaching in the classroom of the highest quality. This requires high levels of teacher training, both initial and ongoing, and it requires high expectations from all of us. Deborah, colleagues, we need to challenge school management and advocate for music education at the highest level. And I ask you to carry on what you're doing with that advocacy. It's so important. Please keep doing that. But music hub leaders and music teachers, we also need to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves if what we are doing is really everything we can do to make music learning in the classroom as rigorous and robust as it should be. And the power to do that is in our hands. Thank you.
That was an absolutely fantastic talk, Mark. It's always so inspiring hearing you. Absolutely wonderful. And your talk kind of took me back to my own school days, which are now a very, very long time ago. And I studied music all the way up to A-level, and I had no idea how music worked. Absolutely none at all. And I did all the grades, and I still had no idea how music worked. And it was only when I was talking to Kevin Rogers in relation to assessment and progression that I began to get an inkling. And that was, a few years back. So it was only through talking to Kevin that I began to perceive what I had not actually been taught all those years ago, which was fascinating, really. So I have a horrible feeling that it may have been going on for a while. It may not be a new phenomenon. Can I just ask you some questions? So much comes out of your talk. Just thinking about teachers in the classroom, can you give us an example of a really brilliant music lesson which exemplifies what you're talking about? I mean, I think you've given us one or two highlights there, but is there another one that you could pull out of your knapsack and share with us?
The thing about great music teaching, Deborah, is that we need to model what we expect by great musical learning. So, if we're expecting our young people to listen intently and to perform skillfully and to compose with imagination, we need teachers who can listen carefully, who can perform confidently, and who are creative and respond musically. Because, assessment, I've talked about this before, and you mentioned assessment, but, assessment in music is all about listening. It's all about responding and actually making decisions about what you hear. Now, you often hear, and I had a conversation with an inspector about this only this week, where they hear singing, and whatever the quality of the singing, the teacher says, that's really good. Love beautiful singing. And sometimes it's not beautiful singing. They're doing their best. They're trying to be encouraging, but that's not helpful. The great music teacher is the one who listens and says, that's a bit out of tune. That just, that could try doing it a different way. That needs to be louder. Like a great conductor, the conductor who listens, who corrects, who suggests, who praises, celebrates, corrects, suggests. That's what great music teaching is about. So it's about being musical, and you see them, but it's the teacher who teaches technically. The teacher who will not accept when they're playing a melody and they're using one finger on the keyboard, who says no, absolutely not. Rather than, oh, well done, but showing them proper technique. Even when you're playing keyboards in the classroom, key stage 1, key stage 2, you can use the right finger patterns, or you can use finger patterns that make things easier. And that's the reason why why you learn scales with different finger patterns, because it makes it easier to play. It's not because we've got a preferred style. It's just practically it's easier to play. So the great music teacher, I'm not rather giving an example of the characteristics of a great music teacher. Ones who do that, who you go in and you see them listening, and you see them responding and modeling. So important.
Absolutely.
It's the exception rather than the rule.
Yes, I mean, I think it is very easy, perhaps, to not urge perhaps students onto greater heights, and that's something that we should all be doing. Even when you're a manager of people in your own organisation, you should be urging your colleagues onto greater heights, and I think that is just good management, really, apart from anything else. Talking about the school in London with its 15 students in a classroom and extraordinary statements on the website. How had it ended up in that situation? Was that SL with the senior leadership or what? What had happened there?
Well, yeah, we've all worked in schools, haven't we, where you recognise, I took my own experience, where the head teacher plays a vital role. The head teacher, the governors play a vital role in allowing that to happen. But of course, head teachers will say to you, as long as it works, it works. And if you get if the music I hear is of good quality, if the work is viewed as good quality, then it's worth investing in. But the thing with the carousels is that sometimes it's not just because they're sometimes people say we can't get teaching staff, or we know it's of poor quality, we've got issues in music, so therefore we the time could be spent better used elsewhere. And I get that. I get that as well. But it's no music department is an island, and in the best schools, the head of music, the music teacher will have the complete support of the head teacher, will have the complete support of governors and senior team who get it, who understand why it's important. And I going to Key Stage 2, I know a school locally to where I live, where the head teacher during the pandemic gave the school hall to the music teacher so that she could actually teach in the school hall with the kids well distanced apart, so they could do work, they could sing, and they could do rhythm work in the hall rather than in the rather tight, cramped music classroom. And that's vision from a head teacher, and that's support from a head teacher. And that's, it's invaluable. But, we've got to make them, we've got to convince them it's worth it, of course. You've got to show them that, for their faith, we give them the goods, we deliver the goods.
So we've had lots and lots of questions and points around teacher training, which, as we know, the government decided to withdraw bursaries for teacher training in music. And there is a shift away from teacher training in higher education, making it schools-based training. Do you think that's going to make it more difficult to instill really rigorous training around how you teach? Because a lot of what you're talking about is teachers falling a bit short. So if you shift all that teacher training into the schools, aren't we just going to replicate the problems? I
mean, I can't comment on DfE policy. We're independent of DfE, but I consider the challenges it may provide. Of course, some schools are great. There are some schools I'll be delighted for young graduates to train them. But there are, I think we need to be very careful about quality wherever they train. It's about quality and it's about time. And so I think it does present some challenges to us. I agree.
So a lot of these questions are really thinking about the future of music education, whether there is one. I've got a question here. Is there a future for instrumental tuition in schools as orchestras and wind bands are declining fast?
Well, it's chicken and egg, isn't it? Really? Because I guess you have to ask the question, and I have asked it in a number of places. The whole class instrumental teaching over the past 20 years has that now 20 years on resulted in more youth orchestras, more choirs, more bands with a bigger supply. So it's chicken and egg. And I suppose the question is the whole class ensemble teaching working? Is it producing long term the supply of musicians, young musicians for those ensembles? If you think, are there more youth orchestras, more bands, more choirs than there were 20 years ago? Someone will have the figures for that.
I don't think there are. I don't think there are there?
And the question, and I've asked the question. It's all very well, given stats about numbers having first access for 1 year or 1 term. How many of those pupils are still learning those instruments 2 years on, and 3 years on, and 4 years on? So it's long-term impact rather than short-term gain or short-term impact. I think there's some really important questions to ask. Of course, there is a future for music education. There's some fantastic stuff going on, but we just need to make sure it's more widespread and more consistent.
I mean, I don't know, you may not like this question. You may say, no, this is entirely the wrong question to be asking, but it's coming through on my stream, so I'm going to ask it. You may say, no, you haven't got the point. So anyway, this is the question. What is your top tip for a classroom music teacher preparing for an Ofsted inspection?
Be musical.
Right, okay.
Don't think you have to try to show us that music is the same as history or maths or geography or English. For example, we don't want to see books in music. The English department may well do a book sample. The history department may do a book sample. We shouldn't be asking for that. Show us the way that you record pupils' work, which is recordings. Come to us with what you do. Be proud of what you do. Be proud that the music is different, because we've got some clear guidance for inspectors on music. We've developed it, and we've got a whole program of training, and it makes very clear the way that music is different to other subjects. Not less robust. I mean, don't get me wrong, those expectations are absolutely, you've heard me this morning, those expectations are absolutely there. But, be confident and give us answers in your musical terms and show us the high quality of your music education.
Can I just go back to that rather depressing example you gave in the primary school, where they were doing the equivalent of 2 + 2 = 4 again and again and again? What had happened in that teacher's head that he didn't understand that was not a hugely enriching experience? How would that happen?
Well, I mean, without talking to anything for that teacher, but I can only surmise that they've got the resources, which are fine, go so far, but actually it's what I was saying earlier about responding musically and about listening and actually having the musical intelligence and the musical competence to take it on. So actually, we're going to improvise. I'm going to show you how to improvise. I'm going to demonstrate how to improvise. It doesn't have to be difficult, just use one note, and all this stuff about one note being bronze, 2 notes being silver, 3 notes being gold. Forget that, because what the teacher was trying to do was thinking, I've got to do an assessment. I've got to show some kind of hoop I've jumped through. And actually it was artificial. So, actually, talking Latin American music, I wonder where one note samba would be assessed in terms of that assessment scheme. You've only used one note, so therefore it can only be a bronze level. Actually, one note samba doesn't just use one note, of course, but just improvising rhythmically in a Latin style on one note could be fantastic. Could be really, so it's having that the bravery to model, the bravery to listen, and to take the kids with you. rather than supervise the kids and instruct the kids in an activity.
But don't you think for that to happen, particularly in our primary schools, we actually need music teachers there? We need people who know about music, who can teach music. Perhaps we need more instrumental teachers in our primary schools.
Well, it's not just about instrumental teaching. That lesson was about the constructive knowledge, about technical knowledge, and the expressive as well. We need more musical teachers. We don't necessarily need more music specialists, but we need teachers to be more musical and to be confident about being more musical in primary schools. You know, I've talked before about primary schools training. How many staff meetings have music in them? You know, why not? And if you're a primary head teacher or music coordinator on the call today, why not start every staff meeting with a song, with some music, to get people confident at being musical, to get confident.
It's such an interesting question. I think even musicians can be reticent about their own musicality. It's an interesting question, that. Can I just again, quite a challenging question has come in on the chat, so I'm going to share it with you.
Of course.
And it goes back to the EBAC, and this question says, you cannot ignore the impact that the EBAC has had on curriculum at Key Stage 3. It is at the heart of the Ofsted inspection manual, and therefore Ofsted must take some responsibility.
It's in the Ofsted handbook. Absolutely, it is, as a Key Stage 4 measure. As a Key Stage 4 measure. It's not about Key Stage 3. It's about Key Stage 4. So I'm really clear there. It's there about the ambition, and you know, let's be honest with you. I think doing English, science, a language, a humanities, mathematics is not a bad thing at GCSE, and there's room for other subjects. There is room for other subjects as well in the curriculum, in the Key Stage 4 curriculum. But why don't they take music? And why do they take music in some schools but not others? You know, it's not just a question of ability. It's not just a question of social area the schools are based in. It's much deeper than that, much more complex than that. And I think it's really important that we say that. But you know, from our point of view, the EBAG is a Key Stage 4 measure. Now, if the school has decided to change Key Stage 3 because of the EBAG, we're going to ask why. We're going to ask why. And you know, they could say it's so that we get more numbers at EBAG Key Stage 4 at the expense of what? And that's where we have to weigh up, don't we? They're getting one benefit at the expense of losing something else. So it's all about questions. I understand the question, and it's there. It is there. But it is a Key Stage 4 measure. But sometimes there are unintended or even intended consequences that we need to discuss and ask questions about.
Yes. Well, I think from the ISM's perspective, we will continue to ask questions around the EBAC, but also we do want to see Progress 8 moving to Progress 5, because we think that really would support music at Key Stage 3 in a way that we desperately need at the moment. Going just back to primary schools, I just want to finish with primary schools. One of the things that occurs to me is whether there should be more singing in primary schools. I don't know whether you've got a thought around that.
Absolutely. Yes, no question about it. And the voice is the instrument that everyone has, isn't it? And when we sing, we listen. And when we sing, we compose. You know, from early years onwards, singing, it should be at the heart of the curriculum, because it's not just singing with the voice, is it? It's singing internally.
Absolutely.
You know, it's singing is physical manifestation of what you're hearing internally. So it's so important for developing musicality. And you know, Why did you just say primary schools, Deborah? Why not secondary schools as well? How
Oh,
much
yeah.
singing? Goodness me, I get so fed up when in secondary schools they say, oh, we cover singing in term 3 in year 8. That's our singing term. Singing should be, it's like reading, isn't it? In English, it's like speaking in English. It goes on in every activity, right at the heart of music education. And I said earlier in the week to the MTA, when you talk about year 7, when you start year 7, why don't you start year 7 with singing and just get them all singing? Everyone can sing. Get them all singing. Singing is so important, but it's got to be taught well. It's got to be challenged and it's got to be rigorous. You can't just say, oh, it's beautiful. Beautiful singing, well done. Singing has got to be rigorous. It's got to be robust. That way you develop musicality.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. As somebody who had a wonderful primary school teacher, Mrs. Roberts, who just led all the singing all the way through my little state primary school, I can only agree with you.
Yeah.
And
Mrs. Parsons was my primary teacher, and Miss Abernethy in infant school, sort of thing, and then Howard Dove in secondary school, where we sang from year 7 up to the 6th form. We were always singing, and that was such a key part of my education. And though those 3 people, Miss Abernethy, Mrs. Parsons, Mr. Dove, always with me, and forever grateful for all 3.
Absolutely. So a big shout out to all of our music teachers who have shaped all of us.
Yes.
So thank you so much, Mark, for sharing your thoughts and your wisdom this morning. It's been a huge pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.